Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Bear Guys and 2T Fitness.
Everything sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel Podcast. This is the Dirty Harry edition. Today we talk The Enforcer. Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. Coming to the defense, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Hit him, Tom.
Let's go and jerk him off.
That's not a hit.
No, it's not a mark against this movie. Far from it. I think if this film could do with story and politics what it does with comedy and dialogue,
Right.
it would really be something. It's. I think the wrong part of this movie is done right. That's how I feel about it.
That's
and the
great.
right part of it is done wrong.
Done wrong.
But I just want to.
Well, this is obviously going to be the movie we're going to argue the most about.
Right, but I wanted to start on a positive note because I have nothing but admiration for this movie in terms of written dialogue and comedy, both with the actors and the writers.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because normally when a movie is funny in spite of itself, it's to do with the actors kind of, raising the bar. But I think here it's in the script too. But in all other respects, this script is lousy, I think. But in terms of quotable dialogue,
Sure.
best movie in the series. Possibly in terms of performances, best movie in the series.
Yeah, right.
I think the best performances of this series, of the sequels at least.
Certainly.
this
Tyne
movie.
Daly is great in this movie.
Tyne Daly is great. She's great with Eastwood,
Yeah.
particularly. We've got Bradford Dillman. We've got the mayor, who that quotable came from, who is a wonderful character actor. We've already talked about the hippie priest. We didn't talk about Albert Popplewell as Mustafa.
Oh.
Which is a complete scene-stealing turn.
Right.
And it feels like that's what's great about this series, regardless of what you think about the individual movie, because in each of these movies, there's a scene-stealing kind of performance from someone.
Yeah.
Almost you could set your watch by it.
Right.
At least one. This movie has about 5 or 6, I would say. I think Bradford Dillman almost runs away with this movie. right from underneath Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
In a way that I entirely
Captain
approve
McKay.
of. In a way that I entirely approve of. I'm not gonna speak ill of the movie from that perspective.
I mean, your biggest problem has to do with the gender politics.
And the lack of plotting and the screenplay, apart from...
I'll agree with that, the plotting, for sure.
Aside from dialogue, the screenplay is very weak. Instead of a screenplay, they have a map of San Francisco.
Yeah.
And that really
the movie
shows.
does just sort of bump along.
Yeah.
And
sequences that should be very exciting also bump along.
Yeah,
in
right.
ways that are baffling. And maybe
All right.
maybe you can sort of say that is partly because they are working so hard on comedy sometimes. Like it feels like a lot of the action sequences kind of go off the rails in service of comedy. Like good comedy that works. But at the price of a decent action sequence sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it's starting to get a little meta, too. Because when Eastwood sees Popwell, we're starting to get dialogue like, I don't know, he looks familiar. from somewhere.
Right, yes.
That kind of thing,
Well, also,
and of course, I mean, we've referenced this before, but for those listening, Popwell is in all of these movies except the last one, playing a different character in each movie.
yeah.
So we're getting the sort of meta joke now.
And Bradford Dillman. Well,
right.
We'll talk about that in
that as well.
He
Which I did not know
No.
until I couldn't believe it when I saw two different character names between the two movies.
Well, I mean, we're not talking about this specifically yet, but does Horace King need to be someone different than Mustafa? Not really.
Right.
Albert Popplewell's playing the same role in the same function in the next movie,
right?
Even though he's playing a different character, as is Bradford Dillman. So it's odd. There's some very odd continuity choices in this series,
right? The choices,
and yet they keep giving us the actors that we love and deserve to come back. So it's really hard to hold it against the movie.
Exactly right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't clued in yet, we are talking about The Enforcer, a 1976 sequel directed by James Fargo.
I didn't look at...
I mean, he's done Caravans. He did Every Which Way But Loose. So
no, really?
Yeah.
That you know, I should have looked. That's on me not for looking that up, but I'm glad I didn't. Because I actually have the note that there's a couple of moments in this movie that feel more like Every Which Way But Loose than a Dirty Harry movie.
Exactly.
I think you know which moments I might be talking about.
We'll get there.
Not that there's an orangutan in this movie.
I was gonna say there's not just to make it clear to everyone.
But
Ruth Gordon will not make an appearance.
Consider this for a second. If Harry's partner at the beginning of the movie was an orangutan rather than an old fat guy who likes pasta,
right?
Would it really make that much difference?
No, yeah. But also that's a character from previous movies too. So I mean,
we get a couple of them in here. This movie's probably the most cares most about in-world continuity.
Right.
Because we have Bressler, and I only know him as Linguini. What's his actual name?
I'm trying to...
I think he's only referred to by Harry as Linguini.
So John is it Mitchum or I can't even read my own writing.
Yeah, John Mitchum.
But he's DiGiorgio.
DiGiorgio, yeah. And Bressler's the other one.
Right.
And that's Harry Gardino, and it is not a face you easily forget. So last time I saw Dirty Harry was about 10 years ago, and as soon as I saw that guy, I was like, "Oh yeah,
You're
he's
like,
in
hey,
Dirty
that
Harry."
guy.
Yeah,
exactly.
You don't forget a face like that.
You don't forget Harry Guardino. I mean, like that guy was always on 1980s television as a bad guy, constantly.
Well,
which leads me back to James
he's a cop
Fargo,
in this, but I wouldn't necessarily call him a good guy.
Right? Yeah. Which leads me back to James Fargo because, I mean, after this movie, there's, a lot of television in his life. Tales of the Golden Monkey, the, A-Team, Scarecrow and Mrs. King. Sidekicks, Hunter.
I have heard of 50% of those.
Okay. See, these are all the ones I know.
The thing is, sadly, if you tell me someone's directed the A-Team, I think more of them.
Yeah.
Because I know that was a tight ship. I don't Stephen J. Cannell's not he's not
fucking
any
around.
chances direct his the greatest TV series of all time,
I just remember saying at one point, dude, BA has to be awake on a plane this week.
Otherwise, we can no longer suspend disbelief that he doesn't know what's going on.
Right. But in this movie, we're dealing with, sort of a journeyman director, but not a Ted Post. He doesn't have the vision that we saw that we were talking about in our last episode. This movie, I think we said 70% on Rotten Tomatoes, which still seems weak to me, but 70% for Magnum Force, 69% for the Enforcer, Tom, just under.
That's because people don't know what movie is what. I guarantee you. That is why they're so close together. They're like, if it's the movie I think it is, I'm going to give it 69%.
Get out of here.
Because I'm not confident that it's not Magnum
That's
Force.
not how Rotten Tomatoes works. Each reviewer doesn't say, I'll give it 69%.
Well, you have me there.
All right. This movie also
Math
outpaces.
was never my strong suit.
It outpaces Magnum Force on a budget of $9 million, opening weekend of $8.8 million, $46.2 million in the USA and the world. And I believe the last movie topped out at 37.9 or something like that.
It feels bigger in scale.
So, yeah, I mean, we have not yet reached the law of diminishing returns, which, sadly, doesn't start until the next movie.
With regards to finances?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay.
Well, and critical response.
Okay, well, yeah.
The critical response gets less with each movie. They make less money as they go on. So you have the law of diminishing returns, which is sort of its own impasse in terms of sequels.
Yep.
But I'd also like to talk about the impasse of the cold open. This is the only Dirty Harry movie that chooses to do a cold open.
Oh, interesting. You're right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Which is interesting for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the fact that it's an impasse. But I would also say it makes it feel more like a TV cop show.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
We have the cold open and then the title sequence, which is the theme music over a helicopter shot of the city skyline with Harry driving around the city. It feels like the beginning of Kojak.
Right.
So those two things together, I think, say a lot about the direction they're going with this movie. What did you think of the content of the cold open?
Well, again, I was struck like I was in the last movie about how violent they are.
Well, yeah.
It's
interesting because it's definitely putting the idea of how we treat women front and center thematically.
Sure.
So it's a relevant cold open to the themes of the movie. However, it that ambiguity about where you stand in relation to the issue of feminism also seems to be there from minute one.
Yeah.
Because we have a woman who's both we know she's being objectified.
She's both nefarious and she's being objectified.
Right.
But, yeah.
So I mean, my operational theory about this movie is that it's written by people who have boned up on feminism, but are here to take it down.
I think we just sort of fundamentally disagree on that.
Like
someone
on this writing team has read Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema by Laura Mulvey, which came out the year before. Definitely, because it's quoted almost verbatim in the movie by Tyne Daly. So,
is that right?
They know what's going on. They just don't like it.
Interesting.
But beside that, I also thought, you can immediately see that they want to drag the level of political discussion back to something simpler in the way of the original Dirty Harry. Like,
yes,
hippie killer with a knife.
Right.
You don't need to think too much about that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it begins like a slasher. Again,
right.
This is like, it's we're back to demonizing counterculture, and we're back to kind of a pure horror style of storytelling.
But the first movie you have sort of the lone wolf killer.
Right.
Then you go to this group of cops, and we're keeping the group dynamic. This group that's working together.
Yeah.
To whatever, take down the city.
Yeah.
So they're keeping aspects of both.
That's fascinating. It is like a mashup of the two, isn't it? You've got a group dynamic with a lone wolf in charge.
Right,
Because,
exactly.
What's his name? Bobby? No, is this his name?
Yeah, Bobby Maxwell.
Oh God, I can't believe I pulled that name.
Deverin
Bobby
Bookwalter,
Maxwell,
I think.
it's made very clear Bobby Maxwell is out there for himself.
Right.
And I suppose you could also
And cuckoo
argue,
for Cocoa Puffs.
I suppose you could argue everyone in that kind of motley crew of radicals is just serving their own interests. No one is.
Yeah.
But
and in that way, this movie does suffer because because they're a group, and because he sets himself as the leader of the group, but like apart from them, he's never as interesting.
And he's trying to screw them.
Right.
He's trying to screw them as much as he's trying to screw the police.
So he's never going to be as interesting as Scorpio is.
Which I wish they'd found a dramatic. You're absolutely right. It makes them kind of pointless as villains.
Right.
But
that's the one thing that really this is the biggest thing I count against.
And I agree with you. It's a big thing for me. I wish they'd have found a dramatic way to make it work, because I do think it speaks to a truth about the and this comes up later in the movie when we get to Mustafa. You know, that what's changed since the days of Scorpio is that, you know, the hippie movement.
You don't have Andrew Robinson.
Well, no, but the hippie movement is kind of organized into, you know, various kind of radical groups.
Yeah, right.
And that's what this movie is reflecting. And I think they were historically a ragtag, you know, this ragtag motley crew. I think that's probably what they were like in reality. The problem is it doesn't work dramatically in the frame of this movie, because they're not a threat at any time.
Yeah.
To anyone.
Right.
Because they're idiots. But I think that groups like that probably were full of idiots.
True.
And I think if you could find a way to make that work.
Well, I think the movie relies on, you know, when they kill that old man or stab that old man.
Yeah.
When you know, this is close to the beginning of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're relying on the brutality of that to carry weight.
Definitely.
Far more than it is.
They've gone into, I mean, this is post Texas Chainsaw Massacre, same year as Carrie, right? So there's probably more of a consciousness of we can build the violence to this horror level.
Yeah.
And that can be our movie. I think there's a sense of that, but it is also a police procedural, and it doesn't really work in those terms.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Harry is fallen upon yet another crime.
I was going to say, Harry intervening in an ongoing crime has become a convention of the series.
Yeah.
But there's sort of two in succession, and the first one it's kind of a reversal of the tragedy comedy rule, because the first one is the comedic one.
Yeah, right.
Which is where he stumbles upon Freddy the Fainter.
Yeah.
In a restaurant. And this is
whose
what I mean.
favorite part is the ride to the
everything about
hospital in the ambulance.
This is what I mean about the comedy working. Everything about this scene is good. Right down to the fact that at the end of it, Freddy says, you know, yeah, but I missed the ride in the ambulance. I mean, that's a great
so good
punchline to that whole scene.
Yeah.
And the fact that you legitimately think something bad is happening, and, you know, in the middle of the scene it's all turned around and he reveals that he's a con artist. I
just love that Harry's driving down the street and finds he finds Freddy the Fainter, and then 2 minutes later, an actual robbery in progress. And he cannot go one city block without finding something crazy happening in the city of San Francisco.
And it's like, Harry's such a cut up in this movie.
He really is.
From day one. I mean, he says, I may have to move fast so I don't need all this linguine slowing me down.
Right.
You know, it's looks like...
But that's a reference to the first movie, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. It's a great line.
Yeah, because there's something about DiGiorgio where I think he says it's his favorite pasta, or there's something to do with it in the first movie.
Interesting. So it's also it's a callback.
It's a callback, yeah.
But it's also very fun. Like, it's very funny. And then when we get to the the store with the hostages.
Right.
It is, again, it's like we've got to change up the Maverick method by which Harry arrests the criminals in the hostage situation. And the solution here is ram raiding the store.
Just drive the car right into the front.
You know, I love
And I don't
that.
think we.
I
think it's hysterical.
It is
I
hysterical.
we haven't talked about this yet, I don't think, about the repeated things in these movies, but it's so McGarnacle. I love that every time one of these things happens, the next scene you see is him at the office being told how much damage he's caused.
Right.
Oh my God, it's sublime to me when they're talking about you took out 2 front doors and the front of a bar, not to mention 1 patrol car. You're like, you owe us $37,000.
Right.
Oh, it's great.
And we're back to, we're sort of, at the end of Magnum Force, you had quite a complicated idea of what the police stood for in society. But I think this movie reasserts the idea that, Harry is the lone wolf hamstrung by bureaucracy.
I was going to say the bureaucracy
of it all.
Every other police
officer only cares about the criminal. They don't care about the victims. They kind of reset to that point, which I think is where you ended up in Dirty Harry. So we sort of missed out. We've kind of missed out a movie's worth of
right.
kind of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
We'll reset again 2 or 3 more times. Speaking of kind of resets, what's this musical chair going on with Harry and Homicide?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
How often is he in Homicide versus being transferred out of it?
That's the other thing that I took away was like this guy is barely in Homicide in every single movie, and just the ease with which he moves from like he's on Stakeout now he's going to Personnel, and okay, there's been a murder. We need you back in Homicide.
It's one thing to, and we've talked about this extensively. I'm not going to relitigate it, but. We've talked about, you've got to suspend disbelief that he didn't resign at the end of the first movie. All this kind of transfer business is not making this easier to take.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Is he a police officer or is he not? That's all I need to know. But I kind of find it. I mean, we're 3 movies in, and the scene that kind of struck me as a like, oh. Harry's sort of, regardless of the fact that every time he goes in an office, someone says, all the damage you've done and you're getting transferred and or demoted, that he still seems to be responsible for a lot of the police education.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a disturbing scene.
Right.
Because it's sort of, it's especially, as I said, I've been watching David Simon's We Own the City. And it's like, as police officers get more dangerous,
complicated,
they're getting it's kind of like they're getting promoted at the same rate, and that seems to be what's happening here, because he's responsible for educating other police officers even though they know he's a fucking maniac,
right?
But in this movie that's kind of shrugged off as just like,
and
the only problem is he was late. It's not that he's doing this job at all.
Yeah, exactly. But on the flip side of that, I mean, we've talked about it because the gang in this movie is called the People's Revolutionary Strike Force, and I don't know if that's supposed to be taken seriously or is a joke.
So. I think, what year was Life of Brian?
Ooh.
I'm going to look that up, because that makes me think of the People's Republic of Judea from Life of Brian, which is satire of, both 79, so it's pre-Life of Brian, which is satire of both the move towards radicalism in the 1970s and, the historical reality that of biblical times. So I think there's a little poke at, because when you first see that gang, they are just a ragtag bunch.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they're nervous, they're feeble. They're just it's like a con.
You imagine the team up.
Yeah.
You imagine the team up before it, and it's like, Johnny, you're the bottle cap. Sally, you're the stick. What you're gonna do is, fuck it, let's just go in.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
it completely. And And they're kind of cobbled together from from the extreme wings of various different movements.
Yeah.
Mustafa wants nothing to. I mean, the fact Mustafa is like as competent a radical as we see, and he steals stuff from a Holiday Inn.
Right.
So what? Like these guys, they're not even as good as Mustafa.
That's great. Well, we're about to meet Tyne Daly, so why don't we take a break and then we'll come back.
That's a good point. Absolutely.
All right.
Let discussions commence.
Right after this, everyone.
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beers. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
And we're back. We are here, Tom and I, talking about The Enforcer. Directed, of course. I don't know about of course, but it's directed by James
Never heard
Fargo. That was generous on my part. Well, as we were saying before we went to break, about now is when we meet Tyne Daly.
It is.
Now, is this... Well, tell me your thoughts about this scene. I mean, you have more problems with the...
None of this reflects on Tyne Daly.
No,
I love her in this. I love her in Cagney and Lacey. It is pretty, like, given that I'm already... The movie's already making me think about TV cop shows. It is kind of crazy that at this point Tyne Daly turns up, who retrospectively...
Mm-hmm.
is gonna be known as one of the most
as
famous
a TV
police...
cop, right?
Yeah, one of the most famous TV cops of all time. I wonder how much this factored into that. Of course, I don't think this is genuinely feminist police drama, and Cagney and Lacey is, but
right.
It's kind of funny that it's sort of the promise of everything you could do with this character sort of comes out in Cagney and Lacey, more or less. So I'm glad she had that, and I'm glad they used her for that later. I think this scene is a mixed bag. It's very, Harry's sexism.
Harry feels manic in this scene.
Harry's sexism and misogyny is very clear. It's met with appropriate resistance from the women in the room.
Yeah.
And that is important. But I sort of... It's so at this point I'm not...
But do you ever have the sense that Harry could give a shit that it's a woman? He cares about whether or not she's actually man or woman, good enough to be on the street.
But what does it say about the fact that our hero is... how much are we supposed to see this through Harry's viewpoint?
Right.
Are we
You're right about that in the sense of... Because the other movies are kind of presenting his viewpoint as always the right viewpoint.
Right. And that's what Laura Mulvey was talking about, with it's not just the male gaze, it's the fact that movies are made through the male viewpoint.
Right.
But the camera is the equivalent of a male POV.
Mm-hmm.
Traditionally in Hollywood cinema. And knowing all that, it's kind of... you're actively asking the viewer to stand against your hero.
Yeah, right.
If you are to read the scene as... if you're to read the scene at face value, the female civilian police officer in this scene says, "I expect you're one of those men who think a woman's place is in the home."
Right.
She chides him for that. Eventually, Tyne Daly kind of snaps back at him.
Yeah.
With all his shit. So, like, this scene would be easier to sort of read.
But you also get the sense that
better for women. Were we not kind of conditioned to see Harry's viewpoint as the be all and end all of what we should be thinking?
Yeah. But isn't there a moment in that scene when she does do that Harry clocks it?
It's possible. I didn't notice it.
I got the sense that he was noticing. She's green. She's inexperienced, but there might be something there.
Yeah, and this comes up later again. Like I think they're trying to balance the old screenplay trope of when it comes to physical action, women are always in the way and making bad decisions in the field. With it's institutionalized sexism that means this woman has never got out of the office before.
Yeah.
And that's why that's why she can't handle street work. It's because no one's given her the chance.
Right.
But it's not clear which camp this movie falls into sometimes.
Well, yeah. And I think you might be right about that in the sense of, at least at this point in the movie, our hero doesn't know how to feel about that. And I think we are watching this through the lens of his eyes. And so that's why the movie is unsure.
Right. But then, I mean, all she has to do is meet his standards of what a woman should be, which is a very low bar.
I don't think it's that.
Okay.
I don't think it's his standards of what a woman should be. I think it's his standards of what a cop should be. And she makes that bar,
which is to die for him.
Well,
or get injured in the line of duty.
But yes, however, like
2 of his partners die in this movie.
I know,
which sort of
but I'm having flashbacks.
Needed to die.
Okay, I'm having flashbacks of an argument that I had with Matt on the other podcast, on the 82 podcast, about Rocky 3, which he found as abhorrently racist. Where like a black man has
to we both
like a black man has to serve a white man and make him the champion again.
Yeah.
But there are
if this movie had a good story, I'd still be calling it a good movie.
Right.
Like, I'm not saying Rocky's not racist. Just because it's a good movie.
Right. But
there's more than just this wrong with the movie, I think. But
at the same time, it's like
I think it was a missed opportunity. I think
in Rocky 3, you already have a character. His name's Apollo Creed. He's already been the champion. He's no longer the champion. If Mickey's dead and you're going to bring one guy back to train Rocky, it would be that character. So I get that it happens to be a black man who's trying to make a white man the champion again, but you're dealing with what you had already brought along when you said this charismatic, wonderful champion was a black man. In this movie,
I don't think that part's racist. I think the fact that he has to accept Paulie's view of the world is what makes it racist. Okay. But anyway, we can't go back to that.
We can't go back and legislate.
We've spent entirely too much time on this podcast talking about Rocky 3 and other podcasts.
But I feel the same way about this movie in the sense of Tyne Daly. What I clue into with this movie, what I really loved about this movie was this, which is otherwise a fairly hapless scene, like you said, the action scenes that should have more action or be more interesting, but this long chase, this foot chase, where Clint Eastwood is going over
So
rooftops,
Oh my god.
chasing this I think it's even at this point just a guy he recognizes.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. This is not important business.
No, but the part that I love about it is that the movie is saying that Tyne Daly is a woman, so she can't run as fast as Clint.
Right.
She's
right.
wearing heels, so she can't run as fast as Clint. Yet
She's essentially comedic because she's a woman trying to do a job of a man.
see,
That
I don't
makes it
think that I don't
comedic.
find the movie.
Oh.
I don't know that it's that comedic. What I liked about it was
She doesn't run like that. You watch Cagney and Lacey, that is all
oh, okay, yeah.
clown. That's all clowning.
But what I liked was that she is able to follow everything that Clint's doing, and they take the time to show her problem solving. She's looking at the roof. She's watching the both
Yeah.
men jump. Then she goes somewhere else.
I agree
By the
in that
time they
scene,
get
yeah.
into, is it the church?
Yes, that ends in that
So
sequence.
by the
ends in
time
church.
that Clint catches him in the church, it's 3 seconds later when Tyne Daly busts through the door and says, "Everybody freeze," which shows that she's
but in a church, and so she shouldn't be pulling a gun there. This is what I mean. I think all the things you're saying are right, but this movie can never sustain a positive representation of a woman. It flounders.
You mean because she chooses to pull her gun in church?
Well, that's one example, but there's a ton of other examples. They never stick the if this is the point they're trying to make, and I don't think it is.
Because to me, it's sort of straight up cop stuff. Like, it doesn't matter. They're chasing the suspect. Of course, she's going to pull her gun in church because she's a cop, and that's what cops do. And I'll say,
I don't think she overall. I don't think she comes out well from that scene, and I think that's the problem. Even if
not for me. It was different for me.
Okay.
That's for me. I was seeing her intelligence at work in following this suspect just as well as Harry did in a completely different way. I loved seeing all of that.
But then they have the
and
stuff
an otherwise
she didn't know
way
she had
too
a bomb
long
the whole time.
Shitty scene. Sorry,
And then
you said
and
what?
She didn't know she had a bomb the whole time. So we have to point that out.
That's because
that
it was
she
locked in
carrying-
a case.
Right. Okay. I don't think this movie is doing women any favors at any point. Sorry.
All right.
I think you can do better in 1976. I really do. I don't think this is not
Well,
1952.
No,
think you
I
can-
mean, I might agree with that, but I'm also, we're also within the confines of a goddamn Dirty Harry movie.
It always undoes its good work. Always. That's what I.
All right.
I mean, you've skipped to that, which is okay. First of all, no, I got something I got to talk about.
All right.
We also skipped over the fact that Harry loses a partner
Yeah.
early on in the movie, which makes you think that Tyne Daly's safe for the rest of the movie, which is another grievance on my part. It's not entirely clear why they're at the docks, is it? Or did I miss something? Why are those homicide detectives there? Except that they need to be there to get shot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
I was waiting for an explanation where they said, they moonlight as security guards or something, but
Or, yeah, they're on stakeout or something.
something. But then I don't know. But then that goes back to Magnum Force. It's like there's no reason for the snack bar to be at the airport except that we're going to do an airport set piece.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same here. We're doing a dock set piece, so they're at the docks for some reason. The line "It's a war, isn't it?" which is the Linguini's widow says after he's getting the last rites, and it's really funny because I just seen the finale to We Own the City, David Simon, the HBO show, and they talk about that from the opposite perspective. There's a veteran police officer who says the problem is we treat policing as a war. That's why everything's gone wrong.
Right.
Whereas here, she's saying, we need to look at it like a war. That's the only way we're going to solve this problem.
Yeah.
So it's just fascinating to me. You couldn't
Well, and it's
find
funny
it more...
because it's prescient in the sense of, that's what would become. The police forces they became militarized.
She's not wrong, but
yeah.
she's clearly advocating for a war.
Right.
And that the right and left should be in battle in society. That we should treat it that way. And we've already said Bressler is a legacy character and actor. Sort of complements how this movie is sort of reshading the Dirty Harry-ness of the series. What kind of joint is Bressler running? Did you see what was on the wall of that office? Did you notice? There's a rubber chicken.
Oh, that I didn't notice.
There's a rubber chicken attached to the wall. There's posters of cows necking. The fuck is this place? I can't let this pass. You can't put this on screen and not refer to it.
How dare you?
This is a working police office. Why is there a rubber chicken on the wall?
I don't remember that.
Is he a clown in his best spare time? What the fuck is going on?
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I've said that Tyne Daly and Clint Eastwood, they play off each other so well. I like the character contrasts. She's fast talking, she moves fast, he's slow and
right.
Well, Eastwood's walk is amazing. He walks fast and slow at the same time.
I know.
I mean, Timothy Olyphant is the only other person who...
Yeah, right. That's great.
He just it's like, I look at him and I go, he looks like he's moving slow, but I've just seen the distance he's covered, and that's faster than I would walk it.
Yeah, the other thing about Clint is, like, when you listen to other actors who have to act with Clint, they talk about, like, don't you dare get too big, because Clint is just even and steady,
Yeah.
And you're gonna look like a clown in makeup and paint and with a beach ball if you go too nuts, because he's just he's so deliberate. And
I
throughout this movie, I keep thinking of the one word marvelous. I love it every time he says marvelous. Marvelous.
And then we get into the rocket launcher demonstration.
Yeah.
This series loves its hardware. You know what I mean? It's like, this is special guest gun of the movie.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Every movie from this point has a special guest gun.
Yeah. I can't wait to get to Deadpool, but...
I know. It transcends the boundary of what we consider guns.
Yes.
Never mind. So, and this is where, this is what I was talking about, the old screenplay cliche of the woman's literally in the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like she doesn't know enough to know to get out of the way of a backfiring.
No, yeah, I'll agree with that.
And then we have the conversation, which again brings in like legacy stuff of Harry's partners always die or they get injured. And a reenactment of the morgue scene from Magnum Force.
Right.
Where Early gets all squeamish and she does the same. So she is very much fitting into the mold.
To a mold of a green partner, of someone who, hasn't been on the job long.
And then we get a moment where...
so that's one of the things that I keep thinking about with this movie in terms of the gender, because you have that scene, and it does call back to a previous scene with a previous partner who's a male. And so it's more fitting that mold of the new partner as opposed to, a woman who can't handle being in.
But it also means that she's automatically doomed to failure. And given that they already killed one of Harry's partners in this movie, I think they could have broken the mold a little bit on that one. Anyway.
All right.
We're not there yet.
I get, yeah.
I liked how Bresler's misogyny was like very on the surface.
Yeah,
I kept waiting for the moment where Harry was like, "No, this is my new partner."
Right.
But it never came. And it reminds you that he knows she's an inspector. He's still gonna talk to her that way.
Right.
And I think that reflects a greater reality than than if they made that scene a comic setup where he thought she was like a legal secretary or something.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like, fucking Bressler, this guy is a mess. And about here, I've got that we get into the foot chase, which we've talked about.
Yeah.
I just want to talk about it from the point of view of music. I started off really liking the music. This is not Lalo Schifrin, by the way, doing the music for this one, I don't think.
I didn't look. I don't remember.
I think this is the only one he didn't do.
Okay.
But it starts off this awesome flute jazz, which I really liked, and then the progression of the music doesn't really fit the chase. It's like that scene was written without having ever watched the scene,
right?
Because it turns into like big band swing, completely unmotivated.
Is this the movie where they fall into the porno shooting?
This is it. That's
right.
They have a foot chase which seems to go like through every landmark in San Francisco, and then they fall into a porno set.
Yeah.
This movie kind of never misses a chance to sort of have that comic button on the scene. It pulls exactly the same thing later on.
Yeah.
Where you think you're going one place and you're going into something which is like sexy and titillating and like saucy. I can't think of a better word. Like risque.
Yeah.
The movie does that later, and after this seemingly endless scene, we get into the Mustafa scene where we see what a black militant group actually looks like. And this is a problematic scene overall, I would say. There's parts of it where
there's parts of it I like.
There's parts of it I like, yeah.
Harry is treating him like they're on the same level. You know what I mean? Just cop to criminal kind of level. Like,
I think that's more Mustafa treating Harry like an equal than Harry treating Mustafa like an equal. He tries to knock him down at any point. Mustafa's the only one who's like saying, "You and me, we're the same. It's the police that are the problem."
Mm-hmm.
I don't think any of that's coming from Harry.
No, but what I mean is, Harry goes in there with a specific intent of like striking a deal, and they do strike a deal, and then the cops work against him.
Oh yeah, I love that. They're just bungling bureaucrats, aren't
right?
They?
Exactly.
They've got the wrong. They are even more racist than Harry because they think this is a black militant job.
Right, exactly.
Whereas we as the audience know it's a blonde white guy in charge of everything.
And no matter what Harry says, he can't get the cops off this idea.
Well, Bradford Dillman, it's like the Keystone Cops he's running when they come in. I love it. It's very funny the way they bumble into every situation and completely get the wrong end of the stick.
Just muck up the works. Yeah.
Yeah. But I had some problems representationally with this barbershop scene. The way that Harry sort of sets the guys in there to sort of rape Tyne Daly as sort of a decoy. Not too comfortable with that. It's like, go at her, boys, and then he goes in the back, talks to Mustafa. And and as an audience, we're supposed to think, hey, it's kind of funny, this possibility that they might rape her.
Yeah, all right. I can't.
But the Mustafa scene itself,
I guess, like what I was thinking of in the moment was more, like directly rape wasn't exactly on my mind. It was like, these guys are going to be giving you shit. Can you handle yourself? It was like a test to me.
I think
I love when he walks back out and she's sitting there talking to them,
which means he's throwing her to the wolves, which means that shows what the opinion of both of them.
Yeah, all right.
You know what I mean? Like they're.
But see, I guess in my mind, I always think of Harry as, Harry is set up, even in the first movie, Harry is set up as like a bigot.
Yes, absolutely.
But he
We should never forget that.
He like.
Doesn't like anyone.
The cavalcade, like one cop says,
Harry hates everybody.
Yeah, the cavalcade of racial epithets that he hates these people and these people, and it's always a terrible thing he's saying. And then his partner says, how does he feel about, I forget what he says, Mexican Americans or whatever he says. And Harry winks and says, especially Spics. But it's, so he's a bigot, but really at his core, he's known as a man who doesn't give a shit about anybody. But I think he's more of a man who expects the best from everybody. It's like you can either do the job or you can't. And I don't care if you're black or white or Mexican or a woman. You can either do it or not.
I'd embrace that argument more if it wasn't what racists say about themselves to get out of being called racist. It's like, I'm an equal opportunities offender.
Right.
I go have a go at it. It's like, why are you having a go at anyone?
Yeah.
And why do I only hear you having a go at people?
And maybe
color?
that's a product of the time too.
Oh,
so,
it is totally. Yeah. It's
but I'm curious
accepted.
as to what the intent was for Harry. Is it like Archie Bunker? Like, are you just a bigot?
Very interesting point. That's a really interesting point. I think it's like a slippery Archie Bunker, isn't it? Where you're sort of set up as which arguably Archie Bunker is also a slippery Archie Bunker.
Right.
It's like you set them up as a bigot, and then people start to identify with the bigot, and you're like, oh fuck, I wrote a bigot, and everyone loves him.
Right.
What do we do now? And that's a lot of Dirty Harry. It's sort of like everyone. I mean, this is the to sort of for me to conform to everyone's prejudices. It's like James Bond.
Yeah. Right.
Because
right, yeah.
Fleming originally wrote him as a misogynist and a bigot, and. Not that he didn't, he had overlap. The writer himself had overlap with that, for sure. But he was specifically written that way. And when the world embraces him, you have to spend the next 50, 60 years trying to, how do you manage
trying to
that
wrestle
for an
with
audience? You're trying to wrestle with it.
Yeah.
And I think the same here. Yet there is precedent in this series of how you can manage that in a way that is not as offensive as this. So that also makes me want to not let this movie off the hook as much as I possibly could, because this movie has solutions for putting Harry's worldview in a kind of context where you can see outside it. I just don't think this movie works.
Maybe it's a lack of practice too. This movie deals with race far more than it does with gender, obviously. So
yeah, but then I love the scene in City Hall.
Yeah.
The way that they make them darlings of the press.
Yeah, they're gonna put them out there
for diversity. So
right.
that that speaks to
so that's what I mean though, that this movie seems.
Oh, it understands what's going on.
Yeah, the movie
but
seems more conscious.
It doesn't fall down on the right side of it,
right.
It understands what's going on.
All right, let's take another break and then we'll
and
come
also
back.
What makes this scene work is Tyne Daly's embarrassed reaction really drives the point home that the system is forcing us into these diversity boxes.
Yeah.
And this is as
well,
much
and the one thing I did
like tokenism is as much as a problem as everything else.
The one thing I like the most about that scene, although maybe I don't know, it's interesting. So she's green, she's new to the Force. You can see on her face that she feels like she has to stay there. But I love that Harry leaves, which gives her permission to leave, and she follows him out the door.
Right.
So that's the moment where the partners
and Harry also
are together.
In the scene again.
What's that?
Harry also resigns in the scene again,
as usual.
It's not as big a deal because it's happened so many times now, and it's not the last time it'll even happen in this movie.
All right, let's take a break, and then we'll come back and finish up with the Enforcer right after this. Does the coronavirus have you feeling oogie? Have you been sitting on your couch for weeks? Nay, have you been sitting on there for months? Well, it's time for you to get back in shape. Check out 2AT Fitness. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Facebook. 2AT Fitness was started by Tina Bernard. She is ready and raring to go to help you get back into the shape you want to get into. They've got all kinds of classes. They've got outdoor in-person classes. They've got online classes if that's what you prefer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back in shape. You're going to find a variety of exercises. You're going to have strength training, cardio, weightlifting, even fun 5-minute burnouts that will push you to your limits. So get off the couch, get into shape. Go ahead and check out 2AT Fitness. Tina Bernard has got you for all your needs. I know her personally. She's fantastic. You're not going to meet a better person to help you become the new you. Check it out. Here we are, back once again, talking the Enforcer. Tom and I are finishing up with this 1976 sequel. Differing opinions.
Some consensus too.
Yeah, sure.
I think we're both entertained by this movie.
I am. It's like, you referenced the hardware scene earlier, and he has to pull her away because she's a woman. I can even remember thinking as a kid when I watched this movie, that wasn't my takeaway. He wasn't pulling her out of the way because she was a woman. I think it's just a good gag. And he's pulling, again, I always think of like he's pulling her away because she doesn't know.
Okay.
Why would any person that hasn't been in the military or been on the force long enough like Harry to know that there's a discharge from the back of a grenade launcher? We all do now because we watch the A-Team. But why would somebody in 1976 know?
The A-Team is not like a public information film. You do realize that, don't you? However, if you wanted to use any show for that purpose, the A-Team is
that's the way to go.
I would listen to Mr. T, B.A. Baracus telling me that over anyone else. No, and it's perfectly possible I'm reading way too much into this stuff. I just think this movie is so loaded with gender stereotype and gender concerns on the surface that it's hard for me to think that these are accidents.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in the scene that we're at now at Coit Tower, where Tyne Daly confronts Harry with the subtext of the movie, which is that his gun is a phallus.
Yeah.
Which is, where she starts quoting from Laura Mulvey's Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, which came out a year before, and rocked the world of film and film studies academia altogether. Now,
do you think it's possible
feminist reading of filmic imagery?
Do you think it's possible this was at her suggestion, the actor's suggestion?
I don't know. But it's interesting, that's what we said about Magnum Force, is that, his gun is very clearly coded as his dick, and
right.
That's what she's saying to him here. And that's interesting to me because it's sort of like,
to be clear to the audience, she's asking him why he uses
Trump knows he's. It's like finding out Trump knows he's evil. What do you do with that?
And specifically, you're referencing how she says, why do you use that gun, right?
Yeah.
And he's talking about.
By the way, we're stacking up the tourist landmarks here.
Yeah.
Coit Tower, City Hall, Transamerica Pyramid. We've had Giant Stadium, Golden Gate Bridge. It's all building up to Alcatraz.
Right. It's the last fucking one on the list.
This is you could do a whole tour of San Francisco based only on this movie.
Man, the kidnapping of that mayor is violent.
In the second half of this scene, and that's the other thing. It's like they show actual street signs,
right?
As if they actually want you to piece this together as like a
well. And I also had the
map.
sense of, because as they're walking down the pier, right? This is when they're having that conversation.
It starts at Coit Tower, and then they get an apple juice
in
lieu of a beer and go down the pier.
Okay. But there's also that sense in this movie of, is this the moment where they're going to become lovers?
Right. Which is it is always left as an undercurrent.
Right.
Um,
But I feel about this movie kind of like I did about Rocky Balboa. I'm glad they never went there.
yeah, I'm glad they never went there, but they didn't even need to go where they did.
Yeah, all right.
In this, I'm not talking about Rocky Balboa.
No, yeah,
which, as we know, is unassailable. At least to you and me. She does her own version of the "They Call Me Mr. Tibbs."
Yeah, right.
Here, she says
She really does.
You can call me Inspector Moore, and I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So it's obvious to me that whoever is behind this movie is thinking about women's rights and bringing those issues into the movie. It's really more about how they do it for me.
Okay.
I don't feel like this is like someone who doesn't understand what's going on with women's rights in the mid-70s.
Mm-hmm.
But it's maybe too much of a reaction to it rather than a discussion of it.
Yeah.
But you're also so they kidnap the mayor at back to Giant Stadium, right? Aren't they? Which we've already seen in the movie.
Yeah.
Again, the music. They're like referencing Herbie Hancock's Chameleon in the music. It's kind of weird. It's not that I don't like. I like all the choices of the music. They just happen seemingly
In
at
the
wrong
wrong
time,
spots.
in the wrong points. And then we get a talk. Like the tip is called in by the ransom is called in to a talk DJ.
Yeah, right.
Your classic 70s talk DJ who I fucking love this.
But I'm getting shades of Halloween 5.
I'm getting shades of Play Misty for Me,
Oh, yeah, right.
which is Eastwood's first movie.
Yeah.
Came out about 5 years before, and I think the Northern California-ness of this movie
Yeah, that's true.
reads to me the way it did in Play Misty for Me. Like it's like there's no other place this can be.
Mm-hmm.
I wish that was done more elegantly. If that idea was done more elegantly, like in Hitchcock's Vertigo, where San Francisco is a character in the movie,
Right.
but you don't feel like you're being hit
But
over
you're
the
not-
head with
Yeah.
tourist hardware in the same way. But it's over. No wonder the next movie goes somewhere else.
Right.
Because they've got no more San
There's
Francisco
no more
to show.
real estate left.
But I like that in a regional sense. Like I like, even from the cold open, I'm like, yeah, this is Northern California. You could be nowhere else in the world
Mm-hmm.
right now. And I think the talk DJ and the Play Misty for Me kind of stuff really feeds into that. We're like second major chase sequence in this movie, which is set place in a sauna, which we know is well, no, we think it's a brothel, but it's not even a brothel. It's a place where you go and have sex with a sex doll.
Yeah, I was gonna. Oh, yeah, that's true.
An old lady's.
I was gonna say it.
Kiss letters. I was all at sea in this sequence. I didn't know what to make of it. I thought I'd fallen asleep and started.
You're
to dream
right.
It.
When he walked into the room and the doll was there,
This is your Every Which Way But Loose.
Yeah.
I mean, you can.
I really
imagine
had a
that
lot of
scene
question
in that
marks.
movie.
You're right
The
in the
old
Lost
ladies-
at Sea
The
metaphor.
old lady's kissing the. Well, I mean, it sort of becomes an entirely comedic sequence
Yeah,
once he goes through the door.
right.
That's sort of only because he's going undercover. He's pretending to be someone else. Again, it's like an extension of the pilot bit in the last movie. You know,
Mhm.
Harry's going undercover. He's pretending to be someone else. It's fun, and Clint Eastwood does it well. So let's do it again
Right.
in this new context. But the only moment that kind of
Let's
like
finish it up with some police brutality.
right, yeah, like the only bit that jars me is when he's like throttling a sex worker who has done nothing to it.
Right, exactly.
It's just like whoa. It just it feels like you're making a movie about women in the police force.
Well, and I
You shouldn't
think
have scenes
yeah,
like
exactly. There's that, and then on top of it, there's that idea of these movies kind of give a sense about justice in America in which if you're doing it for the right reasons or to get the right information, then it's all okay. And that's not how the law is set up.
Yeah.
Like that,
Yeah, and that often checks out. Just in this scene, it really takes you aback.
Yeah.
It's like, regardless of what you think about sex workers in the mid-70s, and, probably there'd be a number of people in the American public who would think they were indecent criminals.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you think that, you're like, but she's not done anything.
Yeah, right.
She's innocent of she doesn't deserve violence, like random violent attacks on her. It's and if you think about in the last movie, we made so much of the prostitute and the pimp, and what a tragedy was that she was killed in such an awful way.
Mm-hmm.
To just kind of casually blow off a throttling like this,
Yeah, right.
A little odd. And obviously the plunger in the face. I did expect Clyde to come through the door. Really. Right turn, Clyde. It was a right turn.
Yeah.
And this is what this part of the movie reminded me that things are more languid than they should be in this tight 90-minute movie. It's like, why are we seeing Carrie watching TV at a bar at this late point in the movie? There should be some forward momentum. We've just had a whole kind of every which way but loose scene. Now he's watching TV in a bar like Dr. Daniel Chalice. It's like, come on, guys, let's keep
go.
this moving.
Let's go. You only got 90 minutes.
I know, it's like you're nearly done. But then, it kind of, again, the movie rescues itself with its characters and performances, because we find out the priest that we saw earlier.
I was going to say,
one scene character is part of the conspiracy.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant.
It's great.
Absolutely brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And then we get to Alcatraz.
Right.
Which, fascinatingly, I think, because I always like to look at, especially with these movies where I can't remember which one's which, I like to look at the little blurb that they have on whatever streaming service I'm watching them on.
Sure.
And this was HBO Max for this one. And the blurb was something along the lines of, radicals take Alcatraz and Harry and a new female partner have to deal with it. I was like, okay. So I was spending the entire movie thinking,
waiting for it to come.
It's like it's the final set piece of the movie. But having seen the whole movie, I'm like, well, it's kind of not a bad description of this plot as it goes.
Right. What else are you going to say?
But you could have.
What else are you going to say? After getting transferred to personnel, Harry goes on a foot chase with his new female partner that lasts quite a bit of time.
Sticks a plunger in a woman's face, throttles her after pretending to be a guy who wants to have sex with a sex doll. Yeah, exactly. Obviously, but then I was just like, so is this The Rock? Is this where they got The Rock from?
Exactly. It starts with that fire hose, which I thought was pretty funny.
You feel like it's not out of the realms of possibility that Michael Bay sees this movie and decides he wants to make a whole movie about this one scene, right?
Right.
I mean, that seems like something that might have happened in Michael Bay's mind.
Sure.
He's like, I'll add a James Bond element, and then there's your movie.
And then done.
It writes itself. And yeah, this is, when they're on the boat on the way out to Alcatraz, this is where the kind of romantic undertones start to peer their head above the precipice.
Above the water, yeah.
Yeah. And you're right, they don't go far with it where it gets distracting, but also...
Doesn't have to be there at all.
Doesn't have to be there at all. Given that it's not going to go anywhere, is it just to show us that Harry could have her if he wanted to? I don't know what the meaning of... Anyway.
Or maybe was the idea...
I see you as a woman now.
Well, yeah, was the idea, we referenced back to the last sequel with the picture of his wife.
Uh-huh.
on a, so it's like, are we going to get a new picture in that frame?
Right. Okay.
And then there's the
I like
tragedy of her not being able to be in that frame
Oh,
at
so
all.
you're right. Okay. Yeah, it gives more stakes to her surviving or not.
Yeah.
Although we know she's in danger because she's Harry's partner. She could die
So,
at any time.
and that's so. I mean, we'll have to talk about this. So yes,
I should hope you want to talk about it as
Kate
well.
Moore dies at the end of this movie, but she
Yeah, she
dies
does.
saving the mayor's
hero.
life, saving Harry's life,
Right.
and being every bit as capable as Harry ever was, at least in my mind's eye. And I get what you're saying. I think you referenced in our ranking episode that, everything that happens to her is undone because she dies. It's all in service. It's like she.
And I'd totally forgotten that one of his partners had already died in this movie.
Yeah,
so don't
right.
throw the trope arc. We've had the trope. We don't need two tropes.
I also think part of that, or wrapped up in part of that, is, again, it's a Dirty Harry movie. And if you're thinking you're going to make another one of these,
yeah,
you're going to start at zero again. So what do and so
yeah.
I'm not as offended by this ending as you are, because to me, she does everything right, even though she herself is saying she screwed up. And Harry says, no, you did great. You did, and I'm a sucker for sacrifice. She sacrifices herself so that the mayor and Harry can live. I will admit,
again, though, but that becomes a sexist trope of the woman always has to be the sacrificial lamb so that men can live.
Yeah,
and it's you could switch that with if you thought of it in racial terms. If this was I don't have to think about it. It happened in Magnum Force.
Yeah, I was going to say you only have to go back one movie.
I was going to talk about Wrath of Khan, but fuck that. We're talking about Magnum Force. And Paul Winfield.
Right.
I died so the white man could live. That's what he said about that role. She absolutely becomes a badass in that scene, and she saves the mayor.
Yeah.
She figures out how to use a gun.
There's the other repeating line, like, Harry says, you can count on it, or he says that throughout this movie. Doesn't she say, go get him, and he says, you can count on it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's the decision to...
But the other thing for me is that...
Given that this movie doesn't really care about continuity in any sense, it's like, we wouldn't need to see her again.
That's true.
No one would.
So
mind.
she didn't have to die, and
we haven't seen Sonny again.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to reference it. It's not like anybody's gonna. I'll give you that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I liked it up until the point that she was machine gunned down. I liked her saving the mayor. I think that's a great moment for her.
Well, and I will cop to the one thing about that's nonsense is she pushes him out of the way, kind of, straightening out her arms, and then just stands in the doorway. She could have just kind of tackled him and gone with him. You know what I mean? So.
But that's the sort of, it's like you're working towards fulfilling a formula rather.
Right,
than,
exactly.
And this movie is already that doesn't have a.
And that's what I mean by virtue of this being a Dirty Harry movie. I don't know.
You can let it off the hook.
Yeah, I think I can.
It's a sound argument.
I think I can let it off the hook because, and that's the thing. Like I wrestled with. I really like Sudden Impact a lot, but Sudden Impact isn't really a Dirty Harry movie. So I think Sudden Impact is a better movie. The Enforcer to me is a better Dirty Harry movie.
Well, I have sympathy with that argument. I wouldn't go that far, but I think you're on the right track.
All right.
Harry resigns again, or as I have it here, Harry stays resigned again. Because I don't understand his status in the police force anymore. So the next movie has to walk it back again. Stop having him so clearly resign. Make it ambiguous.
What does he?
Leave it
Does
on
he
a
throw his badge
cliffhanger.
away? I remember.
He says, no, he definitely says, he says to the mayor, I'm not doing this anymore. I don't know what the actual words are, but he resigns.
Yeah, I mean, he walks away from the mayor, but I always kind of took it as just a fuck you to a political guy. Not necessarily I'm quitting the force.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe.
This would also be a good way to, this could be an end point in the series as well.
Yeah.
Because it's, it's the end of Dirty Harry, more or less. And he didn't resign at the end of the last one.
Do you know why he comes back?
In World or in Out of World?
Out of World.
I don't want... I like Sudden Impact so much, I probably don't want to know, but tell me anyway.
It's not bad, really.
Reagan? Ronald Reagan?
No, it was some magazine.
No, you said it's not bad, so it can't be Reagan.
Some magazine had a vote of like a list of like the actors and their most iconic roles and what you remembered, and like Dirty Harry with Clint Eastwood was so far up the list. I think maybe right under James Bond. Or no, because James Bond would have been changed. It was towards the top of the list that they said, hey, we should probably bring this guy back, don't you think? And that's why Sudden Impact got made.
That explains so much. Not only is it basically the print equivalent of the cartoon game in Rocky Balboa, also the fact that when he comes back in Sudden Impact, which we'll talk about in the next episode, he's more James Bond than ever. I like the melancholy ending.
So that was my last question for you, because they go back to him standing in front of her body with the melancholy music.
Right, but that's not how it completely ends. It ends with Bradford Dillman's voice over a megaphone from the helicopter in another Keystone Cops moment. And I have to say, I like them both, but not together.
Okay. Yeah.
We do one
you're
or the
right.
other.
You do one or the other.
I will never object to more Bradford Dillman. Especially when he is like in full Keystone's Cop mode. It's fantastic. Like they've saved the mayor.
Right.
And then we have a helicopter coming up. We concede to all your demands. Yeah. There's not even a hostage anymore.
It's all done.
But again, this movie's comic timing and execution triumphs everything else, even at the expense of what they're trying to do.
Right.
Very short credit check.
Okay.
Because they are very short credits.
Yeah.
I love the fact that in naming the people in the movie, a casual disdain for those characters comes through. So we have names like Freddy the Fainter, porno director.
Yeah, exactly.
These are kind of loaded titles. And then I was struck by how the credits play over like a still image of San Francisco from the water.
Right.
It's literally a postcard. I mean, the whole movie has been leading towards this point where it has become an actual postcard. Mm-hmm. Because in so many ways it's trying to be a moving postcard of San Francisco.
Yeah.
And I think the next two movies do the same. I think they always freeze frame at the end from this point onwards. Well,
there's always sort of a pulling away from
there is.
Whatever carnage.
That's so true. Oh, and also, this is the second movie in a row to end on a boat.
Oh, right, yeah.
I mean, it's attached to an island.
Yeah.
But it still ends on a boat.
Still on a boat.
I don't think Sudden Impact... Okay, so it ends... They all end on some kind of a dock, right? That's the link.
The Sudden
all
Impact?
Of these sequels. That ends on a pier, like a kind of a...
no.
Boardwalk. On the water.
No, Deadpool ends on a definite pier.
That I remember,
Yeah.
and I will never forget the images from the end of the Deadpool. But I'm sure Sudden Impact ends on the water too. Oh well, we'll see.
Because they're outside the building, aren't they? Where like the prince come back or something.
Is San Paulo on the water?
Yeah, I mean they're at the carousel and all that stuff is by the water, right?
Yeah. Well, that's where they end the movie.
I thought they go somewhere else when the kid comes out and he says the gun that the guy had on him that was Sandra
Aren't
Locke's
they under
gun.
the boardwalk there?
I don't think so. I thought they go back to like the station.
Harry comes out of the sea, doesn't he?
Well, at one point, yeah, but not the very end.
Okay.
Anyway, well, we'll talk about it next time.
Let's talk about the end of that movie when we're talking about that movie.
All right.
Novel idea.
Well, you'll have to tell us what you think. Ladies and gentlemen, The Enforcer, what do you say? Is this movie a misogynistic piece of shit?
I didn't say that.
Or does it...
I did. That's such a misrepresentation of what I said. Just because something is lacking doesn't mean it's evil.
Or does it have
Jesus
something to
Christ.
say about gender?
Or is it the greatest movie of all time? It's one of those two. There's no gray area between that. Jesus.
You'll have to tell us what you think. So find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. For Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. Say goodbye, Tom.
Personnel. That's for assholes.
That's for assholes. Fucking love that line.
I'm going to say that's my favorite line in the movie.
So good.
And it is delivered perfectly.
I wrote that line down and gave it an asterisk and 2 fucking exclamation points. Loved it.
I think if you were playing a game of Dirty Harry or McGonagall,
Yeah,
you'd throw
yeah,
that in.
exactly.
You'd throw that in as the red herring,
Yeah.
wouldn't you?
Who said this?
Who said it, McGonagall or Dirty Harry? I don't know what. If I hadn't just watched the movies, I don't know which way I would go on
Yep.
that one.
That's fantastic. All right, ladies and gentlemen, coming up next is, of course, Sudden Impact. We'll be talking about that next time. Until then.